You deserve a life built from deep inner strength, not exhaustion or self-doubt. This audiobook series guides you back to the version of yourself that knows you are worthy of love, protection, and growth. You'll get 10 empowering chapters, each one revealing how to honor your needs, rebuild confidence, replace self-criticism with compassion, heal old wounds, and choose yourself with clarity and courage. Every chapter delivers real tools you can apply immediately. Subscribing gives you a daily dose of healing, motivation, and emotional clarity, steady guidance that helps you transform from surviving to self-loving, one chapter at a time. Number 1. Identify hidden beliefs, limiting love. Many people move through life unaware of the quiet beliefs shaping how much love they allow themselves to receive. These beliefs do not shout, they whisper beneath decisions, reactions, and patterns. They hide in moments when affection feels uncomfortable, when praise feels undeserved, when relationships feel draining yet familiar. Identifying these beliefs is the first step toward loving yourself more than anyone else, because until you understand the inner script you are following, you cannot rewrite it. This work begins with developing the courage to observe your thoughts without fear, without judgment, and without the need to excuse them. Awareness becomes a mirror that reveals the deeper truth: you were never lacking in worth. You simply learned to see yourself through distorted lenses. Hidden beliefs often begin in childhood, formed long before you had the language to describe your needs or the perspective to understand the actions of others. A child does not interpret neglect as a failure of caregivers. The child interprets it as a failure of self. A child does not label inconsistencies as adult limitations. The child assumes unworthiness. Over time, these impressions harden into beliefs, such as, I must earn love, my needs are a burden, or I am safer staying invisible. As adults, these beliefs operate in the background, influencing choices in subtle but powerful ways. You may downplay your achievements, select partners who confirm your insecurities, or silence your desires, because the old script tells you that expressing them will lead to rejection. Identifying these beliefs requires patience and honesty, because they are often so familiar that they feel like facts. The first step in uncovering these beliefs is to observe emotional reactions. Emotions rarely lie. If compliments create discomfort, it indicates a belief about being undeserving. If solitude feels threatening, it suggests a belief that your value comes from others. If boundaries seem selfish, there may be a belief that your needs do not matter. Each emotional response points to a deeper story. Taking time each day to notice what disturbs your peace is not a trivial exercise. It is a disciplined practice that reveals patterns you may have overlooked for years. When something triggers you, pause and ask what belief it stirred. The trigger is not the problem. The belief behind it is. As you identify these beliefs, the fog around your identity begins to clear. Another powerful method is to examine the language you use about yourself. The mind reveals its beliefs through the words it repeats. If you often think, I always mess things up, or no one ever stays, or I do not deserve better, you are hearing the voice of old conditioning, not objective truth. Writing down these recurring thoughts exposes their structure. When they stay unspoken, they feel absent. Once written, they reveal their flaws. You can trace where they came from: a critical parent, a humiliating moment, a past heartbreak, a long pattern of being overlooked. Understanding the origin allows you to detach from the belief. It becomes clear that the belief is inherited, not chosen, and anything inherited can be unlearned. Self-reflection must be balanced with compassion. The goal is not to judge yourself for holding these beliefs, but to understand that they were survival strategies. You believed what you needed to believe to make sense of experiences that overwhelmed you at the time. You adopted beliefs that helped you navigate environments where love was inconsistent, conditional, or absent. Recognizing this transforms blame into understanding. It strengthens self-respect because you see that you adapted the best way you could. Now, as a conscious adult, you have the ability to choose differently. You can question the belief, challenge its logic, and decide whether it deserves to continue shaping your life. To dismantle limiting beliefs, it helps to examine their consequences. Every belief influences behavior. Consider how your relationships might change if you believed you were worthy of love without earning it. Consider how your career might shift if you believed you deserved opportunities. Consider how your daily habits might evolve if you believed your well-being mattered. Visualizing these alternatives reveals how much power the old beliefs hold. It becomes clear that they have guided your decisions for too long. This clarity strengthens the desire to replace them with healthier beliefs, rooted in self-respect. Action is required to reinforce new beliefs. Insight alone is not enough. Small steps create evidence that challenges old narratives. If you have believed your needs do not matter, express a need in a simple situation. If you have believed love must be earned, practice receiving kindness without deflecting it. If you have believed mistakes define you, make a decision without fear of being imperfect. Each action creates a new reference point for your mind. Over time, these small choices accumulate into a new identity. Identity is not built from dramatic transformation. It is built from consistent choices that reflect the person you are becoming. Some beliefs are harder to release because they are tied to loyalty. You may fear that letting go of them means betraying your past or dishonoring people who influenced your early life. But releasing a limiting belief does not erase the past. It simply frees you from carrying what no longer serves your growth. Loving yourself more than anyone else requires recognizing that your life belongs to you, not to the expectations or wounds of others. You honor your journey not by repeating old patterns, but by evolving beyond them. Self-love, from a stoic perspective, involves clarity, discipline, and responsibility. It means understanding that peace comes from mastering your inner world rather than trying to control external circumstances. Identifying hidden beliefs is the foundation of this mastery. You cannot discipline your reactions if you do not understand the belief driving them. You cannot regulate emotions if you do not see what fuels them. You cannot build a fulfilling life if your beliefs keep you anchored to an outdated identity. Stoic wisdom teaches that self-awareness is a form of power. It allows you to choose responses instead of reacting blindly. It transforms obstacles into opportunities for growth. The process is not always comfortable. Awareness often brings discomfort before it brings peace. You may uncover beliefs that make you uneasy or reveal heartbreak you tried to ignore. But discomfort is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that transformation has begun. Growth rarely feels gentle. It stretches you, challenges you, and pushes you toward a higher version of yourself. When the mind resists change, it is because it is accustomed to survival mode. But you are no longer fighting for survival. You are building a life grounded in self-respect and inner stability. The more you uncover limiting beliefs, the more control you gain over your destiny. You begin to see choices where you once saw limitations. You begin to feel worthy where you once felt doubtful. You begin to speak truth to yourself instead of repeating old wounds. This shift is profound. It affects how you walk into a room, how you handle relationships, how you pursue goals, and how you treat yourself on your hardest days. You realize that the love you once sought from others becomes far more powerful when it comes from within. The work of identifying hidden beliefs is a lifelong practice. People evolve, and so do the beliefs that shape them. With each stage of life, new layers reveal themselves. Approaching this practice with calm curiosity ensures that the journey remains empowering rather than overwhelming. The more you know yourself, the more you trust yourself. And the more you trust yourself, the easier it becomes to love yourself deeply and without condition. The truth is simple. Your beliefs build your reality. When you challenge beliefs that diminish you, you reclaim your power. You step into a life guided not by fear or doubt, but by clarity and intention. Loving yourself more than anyone else begins with knowing yourself fully. Once you see the beliefs limiting your capacity for self-love, you unlock the ability to transform them. This awareness becomes the first step toward a life grounded in strength, dignity, and inner peace. Number 2. Build daily rituals. Nurturing self. Daily rituals shape the rhythm of your life more than motivation ever will. Motivation rises and falls, but rituals anchor you in a steady state of growth. Building rituals that nurture your mind, body, and spirit is one of the most powerful ways to strengthen self-love, because consistency teaches the mind that you are worth showing up for. When you create routines that support your well-being, you send a silent message to yourself each day that your needs matter, your peace is important, and your life deserves structure that lifts you rather than drains you. These rituals do not need grandeur, they require sincerity. Even the smallest act, done daily, becomes a declaration of self-respect. The challenge for many people is believing they have the time or discipline to commit to daily rituals. But rituals are not about perfection. They are about intention. A ritual is simply a conscious action repeated with purpose. It can take 30 seconds or 30 minutes. What matters is that it is done with awareness and chosen for the sake of your well-being. When you understand this, you free yourself from the pressure to design elaborate routines. You begin focusing on rituals that feel natural, meaningful, and sustainable. The goal is not to impress anyone. The goal is to nourish yourself consistently enough to cultivate inner steadiness. A nurturing ritual often begins the moment you wake up. The first minutes of your day hold immense power. They set the tone for how you think, how you respond, and how you treat yourself. Many people wake up and immediately hand their piece to the world, checking messages, scrolling through noise, reacting before they have grounded themselves. A ritual that centers your mind before you engage with the outside world creates emotional stability. It could be as simple as taking a breath with intention, reminding yourself that you control how you show up today. When you choose a deliberate beginning, everything that follows becomes easier to navigate. One of the most transformative rituals is the practice of grounding your thoughts before the mind becomes chaotic. This does not require complex meditation. It can be sitting still for a brief moment, noticing the quality of your thoughts, and guiding them toward clarity. This small act builds mental discipline. It trains your mind to pause instead of rushing. It creates space between thought and reaction, which is a cornerstone of emotional resilience. Over time, your mornings become less about rushing and more about aligning yourself with a purposeful mindset. Another essential ritual is movement. Movement is not only physical, it is emotional release. You carry stress in your muscles, tension in your shoulders, and unspoken worries in your posture. Daily movement, whether stretching, walking, or any form of gentle activity, encourages the body to release what the mind cannot process alone. You begin to feel lighter, more present, and more in control. You do not need to treat movement as a performance. Treat it as a conversation between your mind and your body. When you move daily, you learn to listen to yourself more deeply. Acts of nourishment also form a powerful ritual. Nourishment includes what you eat, what you read, what you listen to, and what you allow into your emotional space. Many people overlook how much influence their daily inputs have on their mindset. A small ritual like preparing a simple meal with care or spending a few minutes reading something uplifting can shift your entire emotional landscape. It reminds you that nourishment is not a luxury, it is a necessity. When you treat nourishment as a ritual rather than an afterthought, you build a foundation of stability and inner strength. A ritual that many people underestimate is the practice of checking in with yourself throughout the day. Life moves quickly, and without intention, hours pass without any awareness of how you feel or what you need. A brief self-check, asking yourself what is causing tension, what needs attention, or what emotion is rising, helps you stay grounded. This ritual prevents burnout by catching stress before it escalates. It strengthens self-awareness and teaches you to respond rather than react. Over time, this simple practice becomes a powerful tool for emotional management. Evening rituals also play an essential role in nurturing self-love. The end of the day is an opportunity to release the noise you've absorbed and return to a state of calm. An evening ritual can be gentle and soothing, dimming lights, slowing your breathing, or reflecting on moments of progress. This practice helps the mind detach from the demands of the day and prepares the body for rest. When you close the day with intention rather than collapse from exhaustion, you train your mind to value rest as much as productivity. Rest is not a reward, it is a requirement for well-being. Another nurturing ritual involves recognizing your own efforts. Too often, people dismiss their progress because they are focused on what remains undone. A ritual of acknowledging even the smallest forward movement builds confidence. It teaches the mind to appreciate growth rather than criticize imperfection. This ritual does not involve forced positivity, it involves honest recognition of effort. When you consistently witness your own growth, you strengthen your sense of capability and self-worth. A ritual that deepens self-love is spending a brief moment each day reconnecting with your intentions. Intentions act as a compass. They guide how you move, how you respond, and how you invest your energy. By revisiting your intentions, you keep your decisions aligned with your values rather than impulse or pressure. This ritual brings clarity. It eliminates unnecessary distractions and reinforces discipline. When done consistently, it becomes easier to remain focused even when life becomes unpredictable. Another meaningful ritual is creating moments of stillness. Stillness allows the mind to reset. It creates mental space where insight can surface. Many breakthroughs happen not during effort, but during calm. Stillness does not require isolation. It requires presence. It can be experienced while sipping a warm drink, watching the sky, or sitting quietly without tasks. This ritual teaches patience and strengthens emotional equilibrium. When you create space for stillness, each day, you begin to navigate challenges with greater inner steadiness. The power of daily rituals lies not in their complexity, but in their repetition. Each ritual reinforces a mindset of self-respect. Each ritual reminds you that your well-being is worthy of protection. Over time, these small actions build a strong foundation of self-love that does not depend on external validation. You begin to feel grounded, purposeful, and capable. You start to experience life with more clarity because your inner world is no longer neglected. The path toward loving yourself more than anyone else begins with the rituals you choose to honor. Each ritual is a promise you keep with yourself. Each promise strengthens trust, and trust is the heart of self-love. When you show up for yourself consistently, you teach your mind that you are reliable, valuable, and deserving of care. These rituals become the invisible structure shaping a stronger, steadier, and more resilient version of you. Through them you create a life where self-love is not an occasional feeling, but a daily practice woven into everything you do. Number 3. Practice boundaries, protecting emotional energy. Protecting your emotional energy begins with understanding that not everyone and everything deserves unrestricted access to your inner world. Many people move through life giving away their time, attention, and emotional capacity without realizing how much it costs them. They say yes when they want to say no, tolerate situations that drain them, and carry burdens that never belong to them. Boundaries are not walls that keep life out. They are filters that determine what is allowed to enter. When you practice boundaries, you protect the peace that keeps you steady. You preserve the mental clarity needed to make sound decisions. You safeguard the emotional strength required to love yourself without conditions. One of the biggest misconceptions about boundaries is the belief that they are selfish or harsh. In truth, boundaries are acts of responsibility. They recognize that you cannot pour from an empty well, and you cannot maintain your strength if you constantly absorb negativity, demands, or obligations that compromise your well-being. Emotional energy is finite, and without boundaries, it becomes depleted. When you understand this, you begin to see boundaries not as rejection but as alignment. You choose what supports your growth rather than what drains your spirit. The first step in practicing boundaries is learning to recognize the early signs of emotional fatigue. Every person experiences these signals differently. For some, it appears as irritation that seems disproportionate to the situation. For others, it shows up as exhaustion, tension, or a subtle feeling of being overwhelmed even before the day starts. Paying attention to these signals teaches you where your emotional limits reside. Once you are aware of these limits, you can protect them before they are crossed. This is a fundamental part of self-respect. When you acknowledge your limits, you no longer force yourself into situations that diminish your sense of balance. Another important aspect of boundaries is understanding that your needs do not require justification. Many people struggle to set boundaries because they believe they must provide a lengthy explanation or defend their choices. But your emotional energy is yours to manage. You do not need permission to take space, decline an invitation, or limit contact with people who disrupt your well-being. When you begin to embrace this truth, you communicate your boundaries with clarity instead of guilt. You shift from apologizing for protecting yourself to honoring your right to live with peace and intention. Practicing boundaries also requires learning to say no without internal conflict. The word no is often feared because it carries the weight of potential disappointment, tension, or conflict. However, a life lived entirely in yes leaves no room for personal growth. Saying no is not about rejecting others, It is about choosing what aligns with your values and capacity. Each time you say no to something that drains you, you say yes to yourself. Over time, this becomes a powerful form of emotional discipline. You begin to evaluate requests not based on obligation but on whether they support your well-being. Another crucial boundary is managing who you allow to influence your emotions. Not everyone deserves to occupy space in your mind. Some people bring clarity, encouragement, and support. Others bring chaos, criticism, or manipulation. When you recognize this difference, you begin to limit conversations that leave you feeling heavy. You step away from relationships that demand constant emotional labor without offering balance. You stop trying to fix situations that refuse to change. Protecting your emotional energy often means stepping back from those who benefit from your silence or your compliance. Distance becomes a form of self-care, not an act of cruelty. Emotional boundaries are not limited to relationships with others. They also involve the relationship you have with yourself. Many people drain their own energy through overthinking, self-criticism, or overcommitment. Practicing boundaries with yourself means limiting how much you indulge in thoughts that damage your confidence. It means stepping away from habits that clutter your mental space. It means choosing rest when your body is signaling exhaustion instead of pushing yourself to satisfy unrealistic expectations. When you enforce boundaries within your own mind, you create an internal environment that supports calm, clarity, and resilience. You also protect your emotional energy by being intentional with what you consume. Every piece of information, news, conversations, entertainment, and social media affects how you feel. Without boundaries, your mind becomes overwhelmed with noise that does not belong to you. Creating intentional limits around consumption helps preserve your emotional stability. This may mean avoiding conversations that revolve around drama, reducing exposure to negativity, or being selective about what you choose to engage with. When you become deliberate about what enters your mental space, you strengthen your ability to think clearly and respond calmly. Time is another area where boundaries are essential. Time is one of the most valuable forms of emotional energy. When you give your time away too freely, you lose opportunities to recharge. Setting boundaries with your time means understanding that you cannot be constantly available. It means creating moments in your day that belong only to you, free from interruption or expectation. Whether it is a quiet moment of reflection, a peaceful walk, or simply a pause to breathe, these moments preserve your emotional foundation. They help you return to your responsibilities with a stronger sense of presence and stability. Practicing boundaries also means allowing others to handle their own emotions. Many people carry the emotional weight of others out of empathy or habit, but this becomes draining over time. You can support others without absorbing their stress. You can listen without fixing. You can care without carrying. Creating this separation is an act of emotional maturity. It teaches you that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You can offer kindness while still protecting your emotional health. Boundaries flourish through consistency. Setting a boundary once is not enough. You must reinforce it. People will test your limits, whether intentionally or not. Your role is to maintain them calmly and steadily. When you consistently uphold your boundaries, others learn how to treat you. You train them to respect your limits, and you reinforce your own self-respect. Boundaries become a natural part of your life, rather than something you struggle to maintain. With time, practicing boundaries transforms your emotional landscape. You begin to feel lighter because you no longer carry unnecessary burdens. You begin to feel more grounded because your decisions align with your values. You begin to feel more confident because you trust yourself to protect your peace. Boundaries become a shield that guards your energy from being scattered. They allow you to build a life rooted in clarity, presence, and emotional strength. When you learn to protect your emotional energy, you create room for joy, rest, stability, and personal growth. You begin to show up in your life fully rather than fractured. You discover that loving yourself more than anyone else does not require grand gestures. It requires honoring your limits, valuing your time, and protecting your inner world from depletion. Through boundaries, you build a life where your peace becomes non-negotiable and your emotional well-being becomes a priority rather than an afterthought. Number 4. Celebrate small victories every day. Progress often goes unnoticed because people tend to measure their lives only by the largest milestones. They wait for dramatic change, major breakthroughs, or undeniable achievements before they allow themselves to feel proud. Yet growth rarely happens in sweeping moments. It unfolds quietly, through ordinary choices, consistent efforts, and small steps that gradually reshape who you are. Celebrating small victories every day trains your mind to recognize progress as it happens. It strengthens your confidence, builds resilience, and nurtures a deeper relationship with yourself. When you learn to value the small wins, you create a steady source of motivation that does not depend on perfect circumstances. Many people overlook small victories because they believe only big accomplishments are worthy of acknowledgement. However, this mindset creates a sense of constant inadequacy. It teaches you that nothing you do is ever enough unless it meets a grand standard. Over time, that pressure becomes discouraging. When you dismiss your daily efforts, you weaken your ability to stay consistent. You begin to lose sight of how far you have already come. But when you intentionally celebrate the moments of effort, patience, or discipline that usually pass unnoticed, you shift your focus from perfection to progress. This shift becomes a powerful force for personal growth. A small victory might be something as simple as getting out of bed on a difficult morning, finishing a task you avoided, or choosing calm over frustration. These moments might seem insignificant, but they are indicators of strength. They show that you are trying, improving, learning, and showing up even when it feels easier to drift. When you acknowledge these moments, you strengthen the part of yourself that wants to keep moving forward. Small victories build momentum, and momentum leads to transformation. Growth is never instant. It is built through persistent, everyday action. Celebrating small victories also strengthens your sense of self-worth. When you allow yourself to feel proud of your daily efforts, you reinforce the belief that you deserve recognition, not only from others, but from yourself. This internal acknowledgement is a powerful builder of self-love. It teaches you to value your own journey instead of comparing it to someone else's pace or achievements. This comparison often steals joy and creates unnecessary pressure. By honoring your own small steps, you detach your self-worth from unrealistic expectations and connect it to your genuine efforts. A crucial part of celebrating small victories is learning to slow down enough to notice them. Many people move through their days on autopilot, rushing from one responsibility to another without pausing to reflect. Intentionally slowing your pace allows you to see the subtle progress happening in real time. This might mean taking a moment to reflect on what you handled well, recognizing the courage it took to face a difficult conversation, or appreciating the discipline behind completing a simple task. These reflections shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance. You begin to realize that your days are filled with quiet wins that deserve acknowledgement. Another benefit of celebrating small victories is the emotional stability it creates. Life is unpredictable, and relying solely on major accomplishments for validation leaves you vulnerable to discouragement during the slower phases of growth. Small celebrations act as emotional checkpoints. They remind you that progress is occurring even when results are not dramatic. This perspective reduces frustration and increases patience. With patience comes persistence, and with persistence comes long-lasting transformation. When you view progress through the lens of daily victories, you develop a steady internal foundation that supports you through challenges. Small victories also teach discipline. Each win represents a choice, a moment where you acted with intention instead of impulse. Choosing to stay focused, to practice kindness, to take care of yourself, or to break an unhelpful habit all require discipline. Acknowledging these moments strengthens that discipline. It becomes easier to make good choices when you recognize yourself for making them. This creates a positive cycle where effort leads to acknowledgement, acknowledgement leads to confidence, and confidence leads to further effort. One of the most meaningful small victories is choosing to treat yourself with compassion. Self-criticism is common. Many people speak to themselves with a harshness they would never direct toward others. When you choose compassion, even in moments where you feel flawed or imperfect, you create a powerful emotional shift. This is not about ignoring mistakes but acknowledging your humanity. Small victories like offering patience to yourself, letting go of unnecessary guilt, or releasing an unrealistic expectation can be as transformative as any external achievement. They strengthen your emotional resilience and expand your capacity for self-love. Another significant small victory is maintaining consistency in habits that support your well-being. Drinking water when you'd usually forget, taking a moment to breathe before reacting, or dedicating a few minutes to something meaningful are all victories rooted in intention. They show that you are taking responsibility for your growth. Over time, these habitual victories accumulate into noticeable changes in mood, energy, and perspective. The mind begins to trust your commitment because the evidence is present every day. Consistency becomes a source of identity rather than just a task. Celebrating small victories also requires letting go of the belief that acknowledgement must be extravagant. A celebration can be a quiet moment of appreciation, a deep breath of satisfaction, or a mental note honoring your effort. You might light a candle, take a brief pause, or simply say to yourself that you are proud of what you've done. Celebrations are personal and do not need to be shared to be meaningful. The power lies in the recognition itself. It becomes a language you speak to yourself, one that fosters encouragement rather than pressure. Another important aspect of daily celebrations is recognizing that every positive action you take counters the negative patterns you are trying to break. If you are building discipline, each small victory strengthens your resolve. If you are healing emotionally, each positive step rewires your mind toward peace. If you are working on self-esteem, each moment of acknowledgement reinforces your worthiness. Small victories represent the practical side of healing and growth. They bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. You also begin to notice how small victories influence the way you interact with others. When you acknowledge your own growth, you become more patient and understanding. You stop expecting perfection from yourself and, by extension, from others. This shift brings ease into relationships. You communicate with more calmness, respond with more clarity, and carry yourself with a sense of grounded confidence. When your mind is trained to recognize your daily wins, you move through life with a lighter heart and clearer vision. Small victories also strengthen gratitude. Gratitude becomes rooted not only in the extraordinary but in the ordinary moments that make life meaningful. This type of gratitude improves emotional balance and increases your overall sense of well-being. When gratitude grows, stress diminishes. You begin to focus more on what is working rather than what is lacking. This mindset keeps you aligned with hope, purpose, and self-belief. In the long run, celebrating small victories becomes a lifestyle. It is a quiet discipline that nourishes your inner world. It teaches you to value the path as much as the destination. It creates a relationship with yourself based on encouragement rather than criticism. Through this practice, you build emotional strength, deepen self-trust, and develop a resilient mindset capable of facing challenges without being overwhelmed by them. Over time, these daily wins begin to shape your identity. You start to see yourself as capable, consistent, and evolving. You become someone who recognizes effort, embraces growth, and refuses to ignore progress. You build a life grounded in inner appreciation rather than external validation. This is the power of celebrating small victories every day. It transforms ordinary moments into stepping stones toward extraordinary self-love. Number 5. Transform negative self-talk into compassion. When you begin shifting the way you speak to yourself, something subtle but powerful starts to move inside you. It begins with noticing the tone that echoes in your mind when you make a mistake, when you feel behind, or when you compare yourself to others. For years, that voice may have sounded sharp, impatient, or disappointed, repeating phrases you wouldn't dare say to someone you love, yet it played on repeat because it felt familiar. But familiarity is not the same as truth, and it's certainly not the same as kindness. Transforming negative self-talk into compassion means stepping out of a lifetime of automatic reactions and stepping into a new way of relating to yourself, one that recognizes your humanity instead of punishing it. Start by catching yourself in the middle of those inner jabs. You may not always notice them right away, but the moment you do, pause and listen closely. Hear the tone, the words, the assumptions behind them. That awareness alone begins to loosen their grip. Every time you interrupt a habitual criticism, you create a small crack where a gentler perspective can enter. Instead of telling yourself you should have known better, try acknowledging that you were doing the best you could with the knowledge and energy you had. Instead of labeling yourself as someone who always messes things up, remind yourself that one imperfect moment does not define the entirety of who you are. Compassion thrives in that space where harshness once lived, and little by little it changes the emotional climate you carry inside. The next step is learning to speak to yourself as you would speak to someone you genuinely care about. Imagine a friend sitting across from you, overwhelmed by self-doubt or feeling crushed by a small setback. Think about the words you would choose to comfort them. You wouldn't criticize them for not being perfect. You wouldn't shame them for having a moment of fear or uncertainty. Instead, you'd offer reassurance. You'd encourage them with warmth. You'd remind them that their worth isn't diminished by a temporary misstep. Bringing that same tone inward can feel unfamiliar at first, almost as if you're pretending, but pretend long enough, and it becomes second nature. With practice, compassion becomes your default language instead of your rare exception. Becoming kinder to yourself also means questioning the origins of your harsh inner dialogue. Much of the negativity you carry didn't begin with you. It may have come from early experiences, the expectations of others, or environments that praised achievement but ignored emotional well-being. Understanding that those internal messages were inherited, not chosen, allows you to consciously release them. You are not obligated to keep repeating a script someone else wrote for you. You have the power to rewrite your internal narrative in a way that reflects your current values, not your old conditioning. As you replace judgment with understanding, you begin creating a space where growth becomes easier. Nothing flourishes under constant criticism. Self-improvement isn't born from shame. It grows out of acceptance. When you treat yourself compassionately, you're not excusing harmful behavior or ignoring areas where you want to grow. You're simply creating a supportive foundation where growth can actually take root. Encouragement motivates far more effectively than self-punishment ever could. When you feel safe within yourself, you take more risks, explore new ideas, and allow yourself to learn without fear of failure. Compassion also helps you separate your identity from your temporary emotional states. Feeling unmotivated doesn't mean you're lazy. Feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean you're incapable. Feeling afraid doesn't mean you're weak. Every emotion is a signal, not a verdict. When you meet your emotions with gentleness, you can understand them instead of fighting them. You can ask yourself what you need rather than criticizing yourself for feeling what you feel. That shift creates emotional resilience because you stop battling yourself and start supporting yourself. One of the most transformative parts of this journey is noticing how much lighter life becomes when you stop attacking yourself from the inside. Tasks feel less heavy when you're not afraid of your own judgment. Relationships feel richer when you aren't constantly proving your worth. Decisions become clearer when you trust yourself instead of doubting every step. Compassion doesn't erase challenges, but it removes the unnecessary burden of self-inflicted pressure. It allows you to move through life with more steadiness and far more self-respect. Over time, the way you speak to yourself shapes the way you show up in the world. When your inner voice becomes softer, your outer presence becomes stronger. You stop shrinking under the weight of imagined flaws. You stop apologizing for simply existing. You begin to stand in your truth with confidence, not arrogance. You learn to offer others the same compassion you cultivate within yourself, because compassion naturally flows outward once it's rooted inward. This transformation is not instant. It's a practice, sometimes an uncomfortable one. You may still catch yourself slipping into old patterns, but each time you redirect your thoughts, you strengthen a new habit. Every gentle phrase replaces a harsh one. Every moment of awareness weakens the grip of old conditioning. Every act of self-kindness reinforces the belief that you deserve to speak to yourself with dignity, patience, and care. And with each step, you build a relationship with yourself that feels healing instead of draining. In the end, transforming negative self-talk into compassion is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It's a slow unraveling of outdated narratives and a steady construction of a healthier inner world. It's choosing to be on your own side instead of your own enemy. And as you continue, you'll realize that loving yourself is not an indulgence. It is a foundation. It shapes the way you think, the way you live, and the way you rise into your fullest self, without apology. Number 6. Reclaim autonomy through intentional choices. Reclaiming autonomy begins the moment you recognize that your life is shaped not only by the circumstances around you, but also by the decisions you make every single day. You might not control everything that unfolds, but you have far more influence than you realize through the choices you allow, the desires you honor, and the boundaries you reinforce. Many people drift through life responding to expectations, obligations, or habits formed long before they ever questioned whether those patterns still serve them. But there comes a point where you start feeling the strain of living on autopilot, and that discomfort becomes an invitation to take back ownership of your direction. This process isn't about perfection or rigid control, it's about becoming deliberate, thoughtful, and aligned with what truly matters to you. The first step in reclaiming autonomy is noticing when you're making decisions out of convenience or fear instead of intention. Often, people choose the familiar path simply because it feels safer, even when it limits their growth. You may find yourself saying yes to things that drain you, agreeing to schedules that overwhelm you, or pursuing goals that no longer resonate with your inner values. When you start paying attention to those moments, you begin to see the difference between choices that empower you and choices that subtly diminish your sense of agency. Awareness shines a light on the unconscious patterns that have guided you, and once those patterns are visible, they start losing their power to direct your life without your consent. Reclaiming your autonomy also means asking yourself what you genuinely want instead of what others might expect from you. Many people silence their authentic preferences because they fear disappointment, conflict, or judgment. They've learned to adapt, to please, or to blend in even when it comes at the cost of their well-being. But intentional living requires honesty about your needs, your aspirations, your limits, and your natural rhythms. When you strip away the external noise and listen to your internal compass, you discover a clarity that was buried under years of assumptions. That clarity becomes a guide, helping you make choices rooted in self-respect rather than obligation. As you strengthen your connection to your own desires, you begin to take small steps that reflect that alignment. You might carve out time for activities that nourish you instead of constantly attending to others' demands. You might choose relationships where your voice is valued rather than silenced. You might commit to practices that support your growth even when they require discomfort or change. These steps don't need to be dramatic. Subtle adjustments can create profound shifts when repeated consistently. Each intentional decision reinforces the belief that your life is truly yours to shape, and that belief becomes the foundation of autonomy. Another essential part of reclaiming your autonomy is learning to tolerate the discomfort that often arises when you begin changing long-standing patterns. People around you may not immediately understand your choices, especially if they've grown accustomed to you prioritizing their needs over your own. You might feel guilt, uncertainty, or vulnerability as you start acting from a place of self-direction. But discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It often means you're growing beyond the limits you previously accepted. When you continue moving forward despite emotional tension, you strengthen your capacity to make decisions that are right for you, rather than decisions that simply keep the peace. Intentional choices also require you to slow down, rather than rushing through life on momentum alone. When you pause before responding, you give yourself the chance to consider what aligns with your values instead of reacting impulsively. You create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, your autonomy expands. You begin asking questions like, does this decision move me closer to the life I want? Does it reflect who I'm becoming? Does it honor my emotional and physical needs? These questions help you remain grounded, preventing you from slipping back into old habits that no longer serve you. Reclaiming autonomy is not only about saying yes to what matters, it's also about saying no to what doesn't. No becomes a powerful tool when used with clarity and purpose. Saying no protects your energy, your time, and your mental clarity. It allows you to devote yourself more fully to the commitments that genuinely align with your path. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes, and soon you find yourself making decisions with confidence rather than hesitation. You stop bending yourself into shapes that don't reflect your truth. You stop accepting roles that limit your expression. You stop investing energy into situations that fail to support your growth. With each intentional choice, you develop a deeper sense of trust in yourself. You prove to yourself that you are capable of steering your own life. This trust becomes a stabilizing force, helping you navigate challenges with resilience instead of fear. When obstacles arise, you no longer crumble under pressure because you know you have the ability to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. You understand that every decision, even difficult ones, is an opportunity to reinforce your autonomy. You choose perspectives that empower you rather than ones that trap you in helplessness. Over time, your choices become an authentic reflection of your inner identity. You start living in alignment rather than contradiction. Your days feel more meaningful because they are shaped intentionally rather than dictated by external pressures. You move with a sense of direction rather than drifting aimlessly. You no longer feel pulled in a dozen directions because you've identified what truly matters and chosen to prioritize it. This alignment doesn't just change how you operate, it changes how you feel about yourself. You begin to experience a quiet strength that comes from honoring your own path. Ultimately, reclaiming autonomy through intentional choices is a lifelong practice. It's not a destination you reach once and stay forever. It's a continuous commitment to self-awareness and deliberate action. Every day offers new opportunities to choose alignment, growth, and authenticity. Every decision becomes a declaration that your life belongs to you. And as you continue making choices rooted in intention rather than habit or fear, you gradually build a life that feels deeply your own. A life shaped by clarity, integrity, and unwavering self-respect. Number 7. Reconnect with inner child truth. There is a part of you that existed long before you learned to doubt yourself, long before responsibilities weighed on your shoulders, long before the world taught you how to shrink or harden or pretend. That part of you still lives within, quietly observing every chapter of your life, waiting for the moment you turn inward and acknowledge its presence again. Reconnecting with your inner child isn't about indulging nostalgia or escaping adulthood. It's about rediscovering the sincerity, curiosity, and emotional honesty that once guided your actions effortlessly. When you reconnect with that younger version of yourself, you access a truth untouched by fear, perfectionism, or social conditioning. This truth helps you see what you've suppressed, what you've lost, and what you still yearn for beneath the polished mask you've learned to wear. Your inner child carries the earliest memories of joy, disappointment, wonder, and vulnerability. These memories shaped the beliefs you hold today, even the ones you rarely examine. When you pause long enough to listen, that younger voice reveals unmet needs, forgotten dreams, and emotional wounds that were never fully acknowledged. Many people move through adulthood, carrying unresolved echoes of childhood moments, times when they felt unseen, misunderstood, or pressured to be someone they weren't ready to become. These moments don't disappear simply because you grow older. They linger beneath the surface, influencing your reactions, your fears, and the stories you tell yourself. Reconnecting with your inner child is a way of bringing those hidden pieces into the light so they can finally be understood with compassion instead of judgment. As you begin this process, you might notice how easily you dismiss your own emotions, how quickly you minimize your needs, or how often you silence yourself to maintain harmony. These habits often originate from childhood, when pleasing others felt like a requirement for acceptance. Your inner child remembers how it felt to want comfort but stay quiet, to desire connection but fear rejection, to seek guidance but worry about being a burden. When you listen to that voice now, you allow yourself to recognize the emotional patterns that have followed you for years. The goal isn't to relive the past, but to understand how those early experiences shaped your adult self. Awareness gives you the chance to rewrite outdated beliefs and create space for healthier expressions of your needs. One powerful way to reconnect with your inner child is to revisit the activities or environments that once sparked joy. Think of the moments when creativity flowed naturally, when imagination came alive without hesitation, or when simple pleasures felt extraordinary. These experiences weren't just childish amusements. They were expressions of your authentic self before fear or doubt clouded your perception. When you give yourself permission to explore those interests again, you revive a part of yourself that has been waiting to breathe. You may be surprised by how grounding and liberating it feels to engage with things that used to make you light up from the inside. These moments remind you that fulfillment doesn't always require complexity. Sometimes it simply requires honesty about what brings you genuine joy. Another way to deepen this reconnection is by observing the emotional reactions that feel disproportionate or puzzling. Often, intense reactions in adulthood are triggered by moments that echo unresolved childhood feelings. When someone dismisses you, when you feel ignored, when you sense criticism, those experiences can awaken emotional responses that originated long before the present moment. Instead of judging these reactions, approach them with curiosity. Ask yourself what your younger self might have needed in similar situations. That simple shift transforms emotional overwhelm into insight. You begin to see these reactions not as weaknesses, but as messages, guiding you toward deeper understanding and healing. Compassion plays a crucial role in this journey. Your inner child does not need your criticism. It needs your patience, your gentleness, and your willingness to sit with discomfort. Healing doesn't come from forcing yourself to move on or pretending past wounds don't matter. It comes from acknowledging that younger version of you with kindness, recognizing the challenges they faced, and offering the reassurance they never received. This compassionate approach softens the harsh narratives you may have carried for years, narratives about being inadequate, overly sensitive, or not enough. When you treat yourself with the care you once wished for, you create a new internal foundation built on respect rather than self-judgment. Reconnecting with your inner child also reveals strengths you may have overlooked. Childhood isn't only defined by vulnerability, it's filled with resilience, imagination, and raw authenticity. Children express emotions openly, ask questions freely, and pursue their interests without hesitation. These qualities often become muted in adulthood, replaced by caution and self-protection. But when you revisit the essence of who you once were, you rediscover a source of courage that still lives within you. That inner child is proof that you survived experiences that could have easily hardened you, and that you still possess the capacity for hope and wonder, even after facing hardship. As you continue this work, you'll notice subtle shifts in how you approach daily life. You begin to make choices that reflect what feels right, rather than what feels expected. You give yourself permission to rest without guilt, to express emotions without apology, and to pursue interests that nourish your soul rather than impress others. You may even find yourself approaching challenges with more creativity and patience, because you've learned to care for the parts of you that once felt overwhelmed. This care strengthens your emotional foundation, enabling you to navigate adulthood with greater clarity and confidence. Reconnecting with your inner child also strengthens your relationship with yourself in ways that extend far beyond memory or reflection. It teaches you to honor your emotional needs instead of suppressing them. It helps you cultivate authenticity in your relationships by expressing your truth without fear. It encourages you to create environments where you feel safe, valued, and understood. And most importantly, it reminds you that self-love is not a destination but a practice, one that requires both courage and softness. The more you listen to the truth within your inner child, the more you reclaim the pieces of yourself that were lost along the way. You discover a form of wholeness that does not come from perfection, but from integration, from bringing together every part of yourself with honesty and acceptance. This reconnection becomes a powerful source of strength, guiding you toward a life rooted in authenticity, emotional clarity, and deep self-respect. Number 8. Honor personal needs without guilt. There comes a moment in life when you realize that neglecting your own needs has never earned you peace, respect, or deeper connection. It may have kept the surface calm for a while, but beneath it lived exhaustion, resentment, and a quiet longing for something more balanced. Honoring your personal needs without guilt is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of emotional maturity. It is the recognition that you cannot pour endlessly from an empty vessel and expect your life to flourish. Somewhere along the way, many people learned that their worth was tied to how much they gave, how much they endured, or how much of themselves they sacrificed. Yet the truth is that no amount of self-abandonment can create genuine fulfillment. Only self-respect can do that, and honoring your needs is the foundation of self-respect. One of the biggest barriers to honoring your needs is the fear of disappointing others. From an early age, you may have been praised for being accommodating, agreeable, or endlessly available. Those patterns become so deeply ingrained that choosing yourself can feel unnatural, even threatening. But guilt is not a reliable indicator of wrongdoing. Often it is merely a sign that you are breaking an old pattern that never served your well-being. Guilt appears whenever you shift a dynamic that required you to shrink, silence yourself, or stretch beyond your limit. When you understand this, guilt becomes less of a warning signal and more of a reminder that you are learning to step into a healthier way of living. Honoring your needs begins with recognizing what those needs actually are. Many people spend years ignoring their physical, emotional, and mental signals because they've trained themselves to push through discomfort. But your body speaks through fatigue, overwhelm, tension, and restlessness. Your emotions speak through frustration, withdrawal, and sudden bursts of irritation. Your mind speaks through disinterest, distraction, and mental fog. These signals are not inconveniences, they are guides. When you slow down long enough to listen to them, you begin to understand what restores you, what drains you, and what requires change. This awareness is the first step toward living in alignment rather than contradiction. Once you identify what you truly need, the next challenge is giving yourself permission to honor it. Permission does not come from the world around you, it comes from within. You grant it by acknowledging that your time, energy, and well-being deserve protection. You grant it by recognizing that rest is not laziness, solitude is not avoidance, and saying no is not disrespect. Every time you choose to meet your needs, despite the lingering guilt, you reinforce the belief that you are worthy of care. Over time, these choices shift your internal dialogue from criticism to acceptance, allowing you to move through your days with greater confidence and emotional stability. A powerful shift happens when you stop treating your needs as inconveniences and start treating them as responsibilities. You have a responsibility to maintain your mental health, to protect your emotional energy, and to support your physical well-being. Fulfilling these responsibilities strengthens your resilience and expands your capacity to navigate life without falling into burnout. When you ignore these responsibilities, life becomes an endless cycle of depletion. But when you honor them, everything around you begins to function more smoothly. You communicate more clearly, connect more authentically, and pursue your goals with renewed focus because you are no longer operating from a place of scarcity. Part of honoring your needs also involves recognizing when certain relationships, obligations, or environments consistently undermine your peace. You cannot thrive where your needs are dismissed or minimized. This does not mean severing ties impulsively. It means being honest about what you can sustain. It means acknowledging when a situation requires new boundaries, new expectations, or new levels of communication. Sometimes honoring your needs means stepping back, even from situations you once handled without question. This step can feel uncomfortable, but it creates space for healthier dynamics to emerge, ones that allow you to show up without feeling depleted or undervalued. Another significant component of this practice is learning to express your needs openly. Many people fear that voicing their needs will lead to conflict, rejection, or misunderstanding. But unspoken needs often become unhealed wounds. When you communicate clearly, you give others the opportunity to understand you not through assumptions, but through truth. People who value you will listen even if they need time to adjust. People who dismiss your needs reveal their own limitations, not your unworthiness. Honest communication does not guarantee perfect outcomes, but it does guarantee that you are showing up in your life with integrity, rather than silent resentment. Honoring your needs also teaches you to slow down and create space for renewal. Modern life encourages constant movement, endless productivity, and the belief that your value is measured by how much you accomplish. But your true strength emerges when you know when to pause. Rest allows your mind to reset, your emotions to settle, and your body to recover. Time alone helps you reconnect with yourself and regain perspective. Quiet moments allow your intuition to speak clearly. These forms of nourishment are not luxuries. They are essential if you want to live with intention rather than exhaustion. As you practice this consistently, you begin to feel a subtle transformation in how you relate to yourself. You no longer see your needs as something to hide or justify. You no longer feel obligated to explain your choices to people who misunderstand your intentions. You begin to embody a calm self-assurance that comes from living according to your inner values rather than external pressures. This shift deepens your self-trust because you prove to yourself repeatedly that you will not abandon your own well-being for the sake of temporary approval. Eventually, honoring your needs without guilt becomes a natural part of your identity. You move through the world with clarity, understanding what supports you and what drains you. Your relationships become healthier because they are built on balance rather than self-sacrifice. Your goals become more fulfilling because they align with your true desires rather than expectations placed on you. And your sense of peace grows stronger because you are living in harmony with yourself instead of constantly fighting your own instincts. The journey toward honoring your needs is not about perfection. It is about learning to listen to yourself with honesty, responding with courage, and treating your well-being as a priority rather than an afterthought. With each decision that reflects your needs, You reinforce the belief that your life has value, your voice matters, and your well-being deserves protection. Over time, this becomes one of the most powerful forms of self-love you can practice, because it transforms not only how you treat yourself, but also how you show up in every area of your life. Number 9. Strengthen confidence through consistent promises. Confidence is often misunderstood as something you are either born with or blessed with at random. But true confidence is not a gift. It is a byproduct of the relationship you build with yourself through small, consistent promises. These promises are the commitments you make to your growth, your well-being, your character, and your long-term vision. Every time you honor a promise to yourself, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable, capable, and worthy of trust. Every time you break a promise, you quietly weaken your internal foundation. Confidence grows from the inside out, and it begins with learning to follow through on the commitments you choose intentionally, even when they feel inconvenient or uncomfortable. One of the most powerful truths about building confidence is that it does not require dramatic achievements or grand declarations. It requires steady, deliberate consistency. When you tell yourself you will take a certain action and then follow through, your mind registers that action as proof of your capability. Over time, these small victories accumulate, forming a deep sense of self-respect. You begin to feel grounded because you no longer depend on external validation to feel secure. Instead, you trust your own ability to act, to grow, and to navigate challenges with resilience. This trust is what confidence is built on, not perfection but consistency. The promises you make to yourself do not need to be complex. In fact, the simpler they are, the more powerful they become. A promise might be waking up a little earlier to create a quiet moment for yourself, drinking more water throughout the day, limiting your time on distractions, or dedicating a few minutes to reflect on your goals. These small commitments may seem insignificant, but they shape your internal identity. Each fulfilled promise strengthens the belief that you can rely on your own discipline. Each time you choose alignment over impulse, you build a stronger foundation. Confidence comes from knowing that you will not abandon yourself when life becomes challenging. There will be moments when you feel unmotivated or overwhelmed, and those moments are not indicators of failure. They are opportunities to strengthen your relationship with yourself. Confidence does not grow in the absence of difficulty. It grows when you keep moving despite the weight of resistance. Even a small action taken on a difficult day can have a profound impact. It signals to your mind that your commitments matter regardless of mood or circumstance. When you repeatedly show up for yourself in this way, you cultivate inner stability. You learn that your word holds value, and that realization nurtures a confidence that is unwavering. Consistency also teaches you to recognize the difference between intentions and actions. Many people rely heavily on intentions, hoping that desire alone will lead them to change. But real growth requires action, even when the motivation fades. By acting consistently, you shift your identity from someone who wishes to someone who does. That shift is transformative. You stop waiting for perfect conditions and start creating progress through deliberate decisions. You learn to respect time instead of letting days pass without direction. Over time, this discipline becomes part of who you are, and confidence emerges naturally because your actions reflect your values. Another essential aspect of strengthening confidence through consistent promises is knowing when a promise no longer aligns with your growth. Confidence is not built through self-punishment or rigid expectations. It is built through clarity, understanding why you made a promise and whether it still serves your development. Sometimes you outgrow old goals, and releasing them is not failure. It is maturity. The promises that matter are the ones that support your well-being, your purpose, and your evolution. When you evaluate your commitments with honesty, you avoid the trap of chasing outdated expectations. You choose commitments that reflect who you are becoming, not who you once were. As you practice honoring your promises, you will notice a shift in how you speak to yourself. Your inner dialogue becomes more encouraging because it is backed by evidence of your reliability. You no longer view yourself through the lens of past insecurities because your recent actions show strength, discipline, and growth. When your inner voice becomes supportive rather than critical, everything in your life begins to feel more attainable. Confidence grows from the harmony between your thoughts and your actions. When they align, doubt loses its influence. Confidence also deepens when you celebrate your consistency, rather than waiting for monumental accomplishments. Many people dismiss their progress because it does not look dramatic, but the truth is that consistency is more powerful than intensity. A few minutes of effort repeated daily often outshines sporadic bursts of motivation. When you acknowledge the commitment behind your progress, you reinforce the behavior that strengthens you. This recognition fuels your momentum and encourages you to continue taking intentional steps forward. Another important part of building confidence is learning to recover from setbacks without harsh self-judgment. Nobody maintains perfect consistency, and expecting yourself to never slip creates unnecessary pressure. What strengthens confidence is how you respond after a lapse. When you recommit without shame, you teach yourself resilience. You learn that progress is not erased by a single misstep. You grow comfortable with imperfection while staying committed to the overall direction. This ability to realign quickly is one of the strongest indicators of a healthy relationship with yourself, and it significantly deepens your confidence. When consistent promises become a natural part of your life, you begin to feel a sense of empowerment that cannot be easily shaken. You no longer need temporary boosts of external encouragement because your confidence is grounded in your behavior. You trust your ability to follow through. You trust your capacity to handle challenges. You trust your judgment because it has been shaped by deliberate choices instead of impulsive reactions. This inner trust becomes a quiet, steady force that guides every area of your life. Ultimately, confidence built through consistent promises is sustainable because it comes from within. It does not depend on approval, recognition, or comparison. It grows from you showing up for yourself repeatedly, even in small ways. It grows from honoring your commitments, adjusting them when needed, and treating yourself with respect through action rather than words. With each promise kept, you reinforce a powerful truth: you are capable, reliable, and worthy of the life you envision. Over time, this truth becomes so deeply embedded that no challenge can diminish it. You stand grounded in the strength you've built, one promise at a time. Number 10. Create environments supporting self-worth. Creating an environment that supports your self-worth begins with the subtle yet profound understanding that the spaces you inhabit, the people you interact with, and the routines you follow all communicate messages to your mind about what you deserve. When you intentionally shape those surroundings, you send a steady, quiet signal to yourself that you are worthy of peace, comfort, respect, and growth. This is not about creating a perfect world around you. It is about choosing what nurtures your spirit and releasing what continually drains it. Every environment you occupy either reinforces your value or diminishes it, and recognizing this truth gives you the power to build a life that reflects care rather than compromise. Start by observing the physical spaces where you spend the most time. Notice whether they welcome you or overwhelm you. A cluttered room can subtly create tension, while a space arranged with intention can feel like a sanctuary. You do not need luxurious surroundings to cultivate a sense of self-worth. Even small adjustments, clearing a corner, organizing a desk, adding a symbol of something meaningful, can shift the emotional tone of a room. When you make your environment feel supportive, you invite your nervous system to relax, and in that calmness, you begin to see yourself with greater compassion. These changes tell your inner world that you deserve comfort, not chaos. But environments are not only physical, they are also emotional and social. Consider the people who populate your daily life. Some encourage your growth, honor your boundaries, and speak to you in ways that match the respect you are learning to offer yourself. Others may consistently diminish your energy, belittle your efforts, or disregard your needs. Part of honoring your worth involves acknowledging which relationships contribute to your well-being and which ones pull you away from it. This doesn't require dramatic exits or confrontations. It begins with creating emotional distance from dynamics that harm you and leaning more deeply into connections that uplift you. As you strengthen your internal sense of value, your tolerance for environments that contradict that value naturally decreases. A supportive environment also includes the habits you practice. What you repeatedly do becomes an invisible structure holding up your life. When your routines reflect moments of nourishment, whether through rest, movement, creativity, or intentional silence, you reinforce the belief that your needs matter. When you rush through your days without pausing to breathe, check in, or recover, you unintentionally teach yourself that your well-being is secondary. Building supportive habits is not about rigid discipline. It is about designing rhythms that allow you to feel steady, grounded, and connected to yourself. Even a few minutes each day spent reconnecting with your inner state can transform the atmosphere of your life. Technology, too, shapes the environment you live in. The digital spaces you visit, the accounts you follow, the conversations you engage in, all of these influence your internal landscape. Ask yourself whether your digital world reflects the kind of emotional quality you want to cultivate. If certain content leaves you feeling inadequate or overstimulated, it may be time to curate a space that encourages growth rather than comparison. Your attention is precious, and how you direct it creates the psychological environment you inhabit. Choosing digital experiences that nurture rather than deplete is another way of honoring your worth. Pay attention also to the sensory elements around you, the sounds, the lighting, the textures, the scent of a room. These small details affect your emotional state far more than you may realize. A calmer lighting choice, a comfortable chair, or a fragrance that soothes you can shift your mood and help you settle into a sense of inner safety. When your senses feel cared for, your mind feels cared for. This subtle nurturing communicates the truth that you deserve gentleness, even from yourself. Creating environments that support your self-worth also involves the boundaries you place between yourself and what harms you. It may mean limiting access to people who drain your energy, saying no to commitments that stretch you too thin, or stepping away from situations that repeatedly undermine your confidence. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters that allow in what is healthy and keep out what undermines your well-being. When you enforce them consistently, you begin to build a life that reflects intentional choice rather than passive tolerance. Each boundary you set becomes a structural beam supporting your worth. Equally important is surrounding yourself with reminders of your progress. Keep objects, notes, or symbols that reflect your growth, your courage, and your resilience. These are not trophies, they are anchors. On days when self-doubt feels heavy, these reminders become evidence that you have already overcome challenges and rebuilt yourself before. They ground you in the truth that you are capable and deserving of stability. These anchors help you walk through difficult moments without losing connection to your own value. And as you continue shaping these environments, you will notice subtle internal shifts. You will begin to choose spaces that match the level of respect you've learned to give yourself. You will seek out people who speak to you with sincerity and care. You will leave behind situations that force you to shrink. You will find yourself drawn to calm rather than chaos, clarity rather than confusion, and authenticity rather than performance. These choices are not acts of selfishness, they are acts of alignment. Most importantly, understand that creating environments that support your self-worth is an ongoing practice. Life evolves, you evolve, and your needs evolve with you. What once felt safe may eventually feel restricting. What once felt overwhelming may later become empowering. Allow your environments to shift as you do. You're not building a fixed world, you're building a nurturing one. A world where your spirit feels welcomed, where your needs are acknowledged, where your presence feels valued. When you commit to shaping your surroundings with intention, you reinforce the message that you are worth the effort. Your environments silently teach you how to treat yourself. When they reflect care, you begin to feel cared for. When they reflect dignity, you begin to embody it. And when they reflect self-respect, you grow into it more fully each day. Through every intentional choice, you create a life that mirrors the truth you are learning to live, that you deserve spaces where your worth is not questioned but honored.